It's a rather interesting discrepancy there. But I wanted
But that's kind of like a black hole the size of the Milky Way or a black hole the size of the solar system. If it's right up on you, it's going to gobble you up.
Or they may reappear 6 months from now, and more bailouts will be needed worldwide.
No, they're already saying that. Do you have a question for Alan Watt?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, Alan, that what you said is nothing new to me. However, the model that Foucault talked about, using Jeremy Bentham's metaphor, the prison panopticon, seems to be here with the technology. And the sad thing is that many of these modalities were discussed 60, 70 years ago. I was thinking of Harold Lasswell's national security state concept and book that was written 1939 to 1940, where he really outlawed a complete Western sort of Soviet-style kind of national security state with violations of accepted freedoms and constitutional.
Yeah, that's right. They use the threat to national security, then they build the shadow government around that. Now it created this parallel government. Now the parallel shadow government is coming out in the open and absorbing what's left. They've, kind of like putting an egg in vinegar. They've been dissolving our shell, turning our skeleton into rubber so they can more easily, like a demonic pelican, force us into their maw. Thank you for the call. Let's get Alan Watt's comment on that.
Yeah, also, too, there's another technique involved, written back about 1914. And H.G. Wells, who was an official propagandist for the Cecil Rhodes Foundation and the Fabian Society, two big players backed by the Astor family and their billions, he called it the world brain. He said eventually all information will be controlled by a world brain, and this information would develop a brand new world culture, which would be under the control, of course, of those fittest to rule it. He's talking about supercomputers and so on.
And they were talking in the 20s about putting drugs and things in the water, specifically fluoride, diet, injections, and injunctions to turn us into gibbering slaves, and they've done an excellent job.
Yeah, and Julian Huxley, the first CEO of UNESCO, also advised to use this technique. But they also, according to Lord Bertrand Russell, another big player, who was also a member of MI5 and 6, by the way, he said that they would also use the needle to make the people more compliant. That's what he said in his own book, The Needle.
Yeah. I had a Wall Street Journal writer here the other day, and she was definitely on the prowl. I hope it's somewhat of a fair piece, but I doubt it. But I'm not gonna cower from it. Though I just may not have time for more stuff like that in the future. And I explained to her, I said, sodium fluoride causes brain damage and bone cancer. And I was printing her mainstream articles. She goes, no, I know that. But she said the elite have to drink it too. Like it was okay. And I said, well, if it's so bad, why do they do it? And she's like, didn't compute. She said, yeah, but they have to do it too. And I said, no, they don't. When Jay Rockefeller was here in town, I did a radio show at a station years ago. This was about 12 years ago. And the other guy had he owned a marina, big marina, and he also owned a bunch of boats you could charter. Big, big for Lake Travis yachts, things that'll hold like 50, 60 people, really nice. And he would take rich people out and captain it, and take people out that wanted to scuba dive at the right time of the year in the Rock Bottom Lake. It's really a Colorado River canyon they filled. It's a 37-mile long lake. But long story short here, for dreaming about being on the lake, I've been able to go on the lake in 2 years. I'm so busy. Literally, 2 years. I love it. I think about it every day. But the issue is Jay Rockefeller was down here for 2 days with the SOS people surveying tens of thousands of acres they'd stolen through watershed rules. And he was captaining the boat with some of the servants and people feeding him and all this stuff. And he also did trips, people down to the Caribbean, but that's a separate issue. And he said he sat there watching it, and they had caviar and food for everybody, but Jay Rockefeller and a few of his assistants, they had ice chests with their own food, their own servants, their own wine, their own bottled water. Yep. And by the way, it was a certain brand of Arkansas water that I later saw one of my friends was drinking. I found all the Hollywood folks drink it. It's same with that green bottled water I got around here sometimes. Point is, he had that, Mountain Valley, Mountain Valley, right? Mountain Valley Spring. And he had all these little packaged in paper. It couldn't be plastic. Salads and food, and was all about how it was all totally organic and all had been grown on farms his family owned. Yep. Then I did a Google search years ago and found that what you said, and the same thing with Prince Philip. I later saw him in a documentary about Windsor Palace. He has all his own fields, all his own beef. It was him on TV, on PBS, inspecting it and inspecting the grain and making sure nothing GMO was fed behind this walled city, and how they have the meat and food flown around with him. Go ahead.
Yes, and there's an article in a British newspaper. Prince Charles, too, had over, I think, 80 to 100 farms. Tenant farmers worked on them. Again, massive herds of Angus beef. Lots of thousands and thousands of acres of naturally grown corn, etc., and everything that you need. They do not need. They don't eat what we eat. There's no way. But plus, here's another thing too. Most folk don't realize that these very important people already believe that we are so contaminated with different diseases that they. And this was in the newspaper in Canada about 2 or 3 years ago. It came out when the Prime Minister of Canada was going abroad. All Prime Ministers and high-level bureaucrats and important people carry at least 2 pints of their own blood, refrigerated blood, with them wherever they go.
That was in USA Today, that Al Gore has a whole refrigerator of blood that follows him.
That's right, because they believe they've already been successful in infecting us all with different kinds of things. They will not risk getting a transfusion from us. And this is standard procedure, has been for the last at least 15 years.
Well, that ties into Bayer, knowingly for over a decade, over 1 million doses, just in one case, of Factor VIII, knowing it all had HIV and hepatitis, and their own documents came out, even MSNBC reported it like it was no big deal, knowing they were going to kill everybody. And they said, oh, well, Bayer was just greedy, didn't care. No, this was a religious sacrament. This was a murder operation, lovingly carried out.
Yes, that's right. And so the public have no idea how far ahead these characters are. I've even been asked about the spraying and how can these guys be breathing the same air as we. Well, most of the time these guys are in their air-conditioned filtered limos or in their air-conditioned filter homes, but they also, and someone sent me this thing, there's actually a collation device that goes in your vein, and it's portable, and you can strap it to your arm. No one knows you're even wearing it. And apparently it's just as effective as the renal kidney dialysis machines. They can be set to take out any kinds of toxin. But it's so expensive, the public won't get it. And
well, I want to add, there's certain areas they don't spray, like whitefish in areas where they stay most of the year now, where they're not chemtrailing. And I wanted to bring that up. They have admitted they've been chemtrailing since the mid-'90s. They got a Nobel Prize in '92 for it. I'm making a separate film on that. And we always said it's barium salts, it's aluminum dioxide, it's terraforming, but also toxic. They love multifaceted things that that cover multiple bases. They love grand slams where they get to carry out multiple evils at the same time and consolidate power. And now they've just come out in USA Today and Associated Press and Reuters, and here it is, Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago. It's time to cool the planet with chemtrailing, terraforming, and the ingredients they list is exactly what private scientists studied it and said it was. And then they go, oh, yes, that was all just testing. Now we're going to start the real operation. The Earth's 20% darker, and all the climatologists I interview say that looking at what they're spraying is actually heating the Earth. So are they trying to cause more? I mean, we know they have weather weapons. I broke the father of weather weapons, Ben Livingston, here on air. What they were doing with it 50 years ago, they could control hurricanes in the late 60s, Stanford Research Institute certified. But are they planning to engineer bigger calamities and droughts and then say, we've got to save you, but then cover it saying they're trying to fix it? Because we've exposed the chemtrails, now they've got to admit it. Go ahead.
Yeah, in the 1970s, I think 78, all the major countries, the United States, Britain, and Canada, and so on, all signed an international agreement, a treaty at the United Nations on weather warfare. And people can go into it and check it out for themselves. In there, it tells you what they could do then. They could create earthquakes, droughts, floods, famines, and so on, all just with the HAARP technology and the spraying alone in conjunction.
And Secretary of Defense Cohen, 1997, April 27th issue of Army Times, said the exact same thing. In fact, people don't believe it. Type Secretary of Defense William Cohen Army times weather weapons, or Secretary of Defense William Cohen, Army times earthquakes. That'll pull it up too. Go ahead, Alan.
And so what they can do so simply now, because it's old technology, it's well tried and tested, and they have given droughts over the years to farming areas. They put lots of farmers out in Canada and the States either with droughts or floods, all at the same time. We always had the same flood in the breadbasket of Canada as you were having in the breadbasket of the U.S., and we're getting droughts at the same time. So this is coordinated to bring down the food supply. But they will convince the public with odd acts of weather warfare that we are, as nature, rebelling. That's what they'll tell us all. They won't tell. They can stand there and whistle in the wind and pretend they've got nothing to do with it because they'll never admit they're actually using it to terrify the public. And then the public will be more compliant and give up even more rights and allow themselves to be guided.
Well, it's just like the New World Order.